Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to another online class. Bit sad that I won't be seeing you guys in person, but I hope all's well with you and your families. Hey, so today we're going to be continuing with our non-price factors of demand, or else it's commonly referred to at higher ends of economics as the determinants of demand. And so last week we had a look at complementary goods and how those impact on consumers' demand for a product. And that's complements with an E, not an I. I know that you're all very intelligent young men, so you'll be able to differentiate between the two. We also looked at how changes in income impact consumers' demand for a product. And we looked at that distinction between normal goods and inferior goods, and how actually an increase or decrease in demand affects those two goods quite differently, as consumers will move from an inferior good to a normal good when their income rises, and conversely, when their income decreases, they'll move to the inferior good as their financial means shrink. So today, we're going to have a look at how the number of consumers affects demand. So consumers really is just the number of people who might potentially buy a product. These are people who want a product, a good or a service, and they have the financial ability to afford the product. So quite simply, when the number of our consumers increase, we'll see an increase in demand. Conversely, when we see a decrease in the number of consumers, we'll see a decrease in demand. So we cast our eyes down to this demand graph for Auckland Rental Housing Weekly, quite a topical market that gets discussed almost on a daily basis in our media. So Auckland has experienced a very steady increase in its population over many, many decades. It has actually exceeded the rate to which housing has been increased in Auckland. So that is one of the factors which has driven the steady and, dare I say, excessive increase in the price of rental housing, along with the price of houses generally. So if we look at our graph down here, we can see that our original demand curve, D1, shows 300,000 houses demanded at P1, $600 per week. You can see Q1, D1, and P1, they all intersect such that there are 300,000 rental houses demanded in a week. Now, if we have an increase in the number of consumers, so those people who are wanting a house and they can afford to buy a house, we're going to see an increase in demand from D1 to D2. So at an increased demand curve, we'll see that at each and every price level, right from 200 through to 1,000, more quantity is demanded. So our example at P1, previously 300,000 consumers demanded rental housing at that price, but with the increase in demand coming about because of the increased number of consumers, there's now 800,000 people, or Q2, demanding rental housing at $600 per week. Now I've got listed down 8 different reasons as to why number of consumers change. First one, immigration and immigration. So New Zealand, for the majority of the last 10 years, our immigration numbers, so the people coming into New Zealand from outside our borders, exceeds the number of people who are immigrating, leaving our great nation. This is somewhat reversed over the past year. So we've turned a situation where we've had a lot of Kiwis departing for greener pastures, if you like, and job opportunities in the UK and Asia, for example. And a lot of these Kiwis are starting to come back with the likes of COVID. On the contra, immigration as well, with the likes of our borders being shut and some of our industries being closed down, we're seeing our immigration numbers decrease somewhat. So other factors that bear on the number of consumers, we've got natural disasters and climate. So this is quite a sad one, obviously, but if we were to have the likes of a tsunami or a volcano or earthquake, we would see potentially and tragically a decrease in the number of consumers coming about from the losses of life. Viruses and diseases, yes, I don't quite know the total death toll of COVID presently, but it's certainly in the millions. So when people are struck down by the virus or a different kind of disease or pathogen, we would see a decrease in the number of consumers. A decrease for shifting demand to the left, an increase in number of consumers would shift to the right. Birth rates. So in New Zealand, our birth rate is 2.1 for every 2 adults. So it means that our population is slowly increasing, but our population is actually on the back of natural procreation within our borders, but our actual population's increased a lot faster than that birth rate of 2.1 due to the impacts of immigration. Mortality rates, well, mortality rates are decreasing as we have safer workplaces, better medicine. If we just take out COVID, of course, from the situation, people are living longer. Maternal death rates are decreasing as we get better hospital care. So people are living longer, which is fantastic. Job opportunities. People will move in between nations and regions within a country due to the amount of job opportunities. Cost of living. Well, Auckland, this is quite topical for us Aucklanders, as we have quite high cost of living, and there's been a lot of previous Aucklanders who have moved out into the regions because of the excessive costs in housing, our regional fuel tax, a few other factors, which just has made living in Auckland unaffordable. Last but not least, war and conflict, another tragic driver of changes in the number of consumers. So gentlemen, I'd like you to copy this slide to your notes, thank you. And I think it's probably okay just to copy one demand curve change as opposed to doing 2 versions of the model. But if you want to be extra slick, you could draw one model with D1 to D2 showing the increased number of consumers, and then D1 to D3 showing a decrease in the number of consumers. Okay, following that, I'd like you guys to go on to page 40 of your workbook and complete activity 40 on page 34, and I want you to choose one of the reasons listed below for changes of numbers of consumers, and I'd like you to write an explanation over how the decrease in demand comes about. So there's no need to draw the shift in demand, but that probably would be my preference for you guys to practice. Okay. Next, I would like you guys to read and consider the next slide, slide 8 of our PowerPoint, which is the change of price of substitutes. So this is another non-price factor or determinant of demand that will shift a demand curve. So substitute goods are those that can be used in place of another. So they satisfy the same need or want. These are the substitute goods are the goods of competitors. So butter and margarine. Although butter and margarine aren't substitutes for some people, so our dairy intolerant consumers, for many people they are a substitute good. They are the spread you put on toast, bread, over which you put your fillings or your peanut butter or the like. What we see with this relationship between substitutes is that the increase in the price of a substitute, so we'll look at the market demand for margarine over here, so an increase in the price of margarine from P1 to P2 causes a shift along the margarine demand curve. That's right, we know that, law of demand, pretty easy peasy. we'll see here that there's a decrease in the amount of consumers demanding, or the quantity demanded, of margarine from Q1 to Q2. So there's been 2,000 people who are no longer consume margarine when the price goes from $3 to $4. These people who were previously consuming margarine at Q1 but are no longer at Q2, they still have that same want, that same need for a spread. And so some of these consumers will move over to the butter market. So the butter market will see an increase in demand because its substitute has had an increase in its price. This is the substitution effect here. So we'll see that P1, $3 previously, 20,000 people demanded butter on a weekly basis, or Q1, but with the price of margarine increasing, some of these consumers have come over here and have increased their consumption of butter from Q1 to Q2, or 20,000 to 40,000. Consumers now see butter as relatively more affordable and better value for money. So I'm going to ask you guys to copy down this slide, and this is one where I ask you to copy down both models, just so we can really see the relationship between changes in quantity demanded in the substitutes market versus the increase in demand in the other substitutes market. Okay, following that, gentlemen, you have 3 more activities to do, and these are activities 41 to 43 on pages 35 and 36 of the workbook. Okay, any questions or issues, gentlemen, please send me an email at t.horrocks@ags.school.nz. All the best with today, and keep your chins up, guys. Kia kaha.